Hello, hi. I gotta get better at this. Hey, welcome to another episode of Jeff Has Cool Friends. I'm Jeff from the Jeff of the Having Cool Friends. So we got that half covered. So now we just got to talk about the cool friend, and I'm very excited that I have this cool friend. I have seen this cool friend 2 weekends in a row in 2 different cities at 2 different conventions. He might have the weirdest IMDb page I have ever seen, as I have done my research, and he's just one of the life of the party and just such a multi-hyphenate that I don't even know how to describe you. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Thatcher.
Thank you. That's a hell of an. I realized last year that I'm the human embodiment of ADHD. That's what it looks like on paper if you look at my IMDb page.
Or if you are with you in a social situation.
Well, yeah, that's true too. I mean, if you meet me, definitely. But I mean, if you just look at it on paper, you're like, oh, he doesn't know what he wants to do, so he does a lot of things. And I'm very happy about it. It's been never dull, never dull. But thank you.
Of
Oh,
course.
so you're the. Oh, I get it. So wait, that makes me a cool friend.
Could you believe it?
I'm shocked because
You're in there. You've been a cool friend. You've been a cool friend ever since we were introduced, as me and many of my guests in the past have been, by social glue / also incredible talent, Jennifer Muro.
Oh, we love
Jen connected us at some event, and we took to each other. I saw you at Star Trek Las Vegas, the last weekend. And before that, I saw you at San Diego Comic-Con.
People are going to talk. They're going to say, "What's going on?"
So yeah, people are like, "What is this with you and Kirk?" And be like, "It's not important.
We're not
setting up a podcast.
We're just friends. Okay, we're just friends."
When I go to sort of like break the ice and sort of be like, "So you're known for blank,"
right.
I'm actually going to take a quote from you, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I said it, so
I'm gonna do that if that's okay, because I understand, whatever. Kirk Thatcher said, "I could win the Nobel Prize, and my gravestone will still say, Punk on Bus, Star Trek 4."
Yep.
I'm paraphrasing it because I forgot to write down the quote, but that's
that's pretty much exactly it. Yeah, it will haunt me for the rest of my days, but it's a good haunting. It's a friendly ghost.
A character that you have played at least twice in larger projects, of course, in Picard season 2, and as well as Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yes, that was a deep cut. There's a whole story about that. But yeah, you have to be a credit reader and know and recognize me, which is tough, but yeah.
I recognized you.
It was weird. And people were like, "Oh my God, I screamed out that scar." I'm like, really? Yeah. And my head's the size of
I did. Yeah, but
aspirin.
It's very visible character. But there's so much so like having that, and it's funny because like if that were the thing you'd be known for, people would be like, "Well, that's cool," but here's the thing. That might be the least interesting thing about you is Punk on Bus, Star Trek 4, because
interesting things about
you have worked in Star Wars, the Muppets, Star Trek, all before you were 30, by the way.
Gremlins.
You were in Gremlins and Gremlins 2, which we did cover on Nerd, the other podcast we do. We in my opinion, one of the most brilliant sequels in all of history, and I'm not even kidding. So you also you've directed several Muppets projects in this millennium, starting all the way back in 2002 with the Christmas one.
Yeah.
And you did a very Muppet Christmas movie. You did Muppets Wizard of Oz. You did a lot of those most recently. And this one, just such a delight. I actually watched it again today in preparation for this show. Muppets Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, that was for me. I wanted to do that forever.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I could go through all your credits, but we can just keep going.
Sure.
Did you have any influence in casting, or were they like, these are the celebrities that we got that wanted to work with the Muppets? Like we got Will Arnett. Write him in.
Arnett, yeah. I realized after directing all day, my voice basically turns into Will Arnett's. It gets dry and deeper. And I was like, I remember at the end of like the first week, I'm like, "Hey, I just realized when I get tired, I sound like you." And he's like, "Ha, yeah." No, I mean, we had a list of people we wanted, and half the time Disney's like, "No." either because they're too expensive or they just know they wouldn't do it. And the Muppets don't pay a lot for guest stars. So, and I'm not saying the people who did it, did it for $1, but they basically said, here's who we're going after, and then you find out if you get them or not. But they don't listen to me. Disney is a big corporate machine and that kind of stuff. I mean, I had my favorites. I will say, and this is no shade on Will Arnett, who was great. I wanted Dick Van Dyke for the butler.
Yeah.
Because, not a lot of people know this, he's a huge Halloween fan.
Mhm.
And he and I have become acquaintances over the years because of Halloween and computer animation. I met him at a light wave animation class, and it was funny because I was maybe 35. Everyone else there was like 20. They had no clue who Dick Van Dyke was. They're like, "Who's the old guy?" I'm like, "You seriously?
You don't know who that is?"
No, they're all like computer animation nerds.
Yeah.
And so I sat with Dick Van Dyke every day at lunch and just, regaled him with questions, and he answered stories and found out, which I'd heard from friends that rent him Halloween stuff for his big Halloween thing he does at his house every year. He goes to, like, I guess K&B or I forget, or Stan Winston's, whatever. He goes to the big effects houses and just, rents the stuff for a weekend or a week to decorate his house. So he's a huge Halloween fan. So we hit it off. So I thought it would be great. And also, he's just awesome and radiates.
And as he's a legend too. Like he's so great to do.
Yeah. And Disney was like, nah, kids won't know who he is. I'm like, I'm well aware of that, but this is how they find out. But it is weird. Casting and marketing now are kind of the same thing. So you deal with a lot of weird prejudices or just a lot of the time they're like, well, kids won't know who that is. Well, I always go, I don't care. I know who it is, and adults will, and they'll learn who it is. But it's a weird uphill battle for any TV movie and features obviously as well. Usually with features, you can pay the people that are on your short list. I mean, it's funny, back in the day we were doing Muppet movies, like when I was Treasure Island and Christmas Carol, like the list was like Robin Williams and there's these AA
Tim
list.
Curry and
Tim Curry. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you get them. The Brits tend to be bigger fans of the Muppets than, not that Robin Williams hated the Muppets or anything. I'm not saying that, but
but the Muppets gained their original popularity in the UK.
In England,
that was the first. The pilot was bought there before it was ever.
They tried to. USA. They sold it. They pitched it to all the networks here, and Lou Grade bought it, and then it was on syndication. But anyway, the long answer is no, or the short answer is no. I don't get any voice in casting. I mean, I assume if I had a huge problem, like, oh my God, that's terrible, they still might not listen to me. But luckily, we got great people, and they were awesome.
It's interesting that Disney is saying it like the kids won't know it, because I always found that one of the most interesting things about the Muppets was that while kids did enjoy it, it was clearly made with adults in mind as well.
When I started working with Jim Henson, he was very adamant. I said, I like the Muppet Show because to me it was Monty Python with puppets. And he's like, exactly. It's not. Sesame Street is a kid show. The Muppet Show is a sketch comedy show with puppets. And I got that immediately. I think a lot of people, including Disney execs, are very afraid that it might. And look, I get it. You don't do things that are inappropriate for kids, like sex or murder stuff, but just funny jokes or weird jokes. I think SpongeBob does it really well. The Muppets would never do South Park, but Disney's very afraid to offend or again, a lot of the times kids won't know who that is or kids won't get it. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't know who Humphrey Bogart was when I was a kid.
They didn't know who Rita Moreno was, did they? Like
exactly.
Paul Williams.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing. The Muppet Show guests were. Again, you have to remember in the 70s, variety shows were huge. There was Sonny and Cher. It was a staple on American television for at least 2 decades. I mean, with Smothers Brothers and Sonny and Cher. And I mean, just, you could go down the line. I mean, every year there was a couple new, variety shows like Mac Davis and Maya. It was like the Mac Davis. I mean, people you don't even know, and they had their own variety show. So the Muppets was a riff on that. And instead of having, Mac Davis or Sonny and Cher, the guests were guests at that level from that era, whether it was comedians or musicians or dancers or whatever. I mean, they had Leo Sayer was a guest. I mean, if you look at the list, it's jokingly sort of like the Love Boat guests.
Yeah.
Sometimes they got huge stars. They got Cher, or they got
remember the Star Wars episode.
Yeah.
They got everyone.
Yeah, they were, and that was season 2, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually, it's funny. I'm not. The Muppet fans probably are yelling at their computer.
Let them. They yelled enough on the James Voidle episode.
Yeah, they know which episode it was or what season it was. Yeah.
It seems to me, as I have gone through, that you have worked with my cool friend and actress Morgana Ignis on the Curious
Uh,
Creation. So, and it is funny. I love seeing like the web, and a lot of people talk about this. They'll talk to me about this. Like they'll be like, "Oh, like there's this web of cool friends," and it's just like, well, yeah. Like for example, you play one of the main characters in Werewolf by Night.
right, right. Well,
Uh,
yeah, thank you.
and really incredible. You were Joven, I believe, was his name.
Yes, Joven or Jovan, yeah.
Yeah, and
Great,
just
great.
like an absolute badass, like sort of like kind of punk Viking monster hunter.
Yeah, it was like he was supposed to be like this ancient Scottish, like
Yeah.
almost Celtic.
Oh,
And
that's
you don't
right.
know how old he is. Like, is he 800
Immortal.
years old? Or I wanted to play him like he was a Falstaffian sort of. He's a guy who kills monsters, but he wants to hang out and have a beer with
He was a
everybody.
drunk.
Like, and the character was not super nuanced. They were monster hunters, so I brought that to the beginning. I said, I'm going to walk around like, oh, this is great. This is going to be a great party. I thought that we were there for a wake, which we sort of were to honor this guy who just died, the greatest monster hunter of all time. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be, hopefully there's good beer and we can just party it up. So, and Michael Giacchino, the director, was fine with that. It brought some flavoring because everyone else was just sort of grimacing, like, I'm a badass and I'm going to be a badass.
Yeah, and he's a good friend of yours too, Michael.
Yeah, Michael. Well, he scored Muppets Wizard of Oz, and we just realized we had the same childhood, and we had, I mean, even our houses are decorated in some ways similarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just became best friends really fast, and have been that way for whatever it's been now, 20
And
years.
because like when I saw you at Comic-Con, it was like you, him, Miro, David
Yeah,
Silverman
yeah.
was there, who recent guest. And then I remember David Silverman plays the flaming tuba,
Plays
a
the flame
random
too.
sort of like cast off character in Werewolf by Night as well.
I went to college with David. I've known David Silverman since 1981.
Oh, it's wild.
So it's, we became this kind of tight knit three of us hang out almost pretty much every week when we're all in town. And yeah, so it's this great, dear friends. And so when he got the movie, he cast us in it, which was delightful and fun, and it was a great experience.
That's super cool. That's super cool. You're in obviously Picard, which cool friend Todd Stashwick as well.
Oh, I love Stash. He's a recent
Yeah.
friend, but what a great guy.
And again, I'm assuming he's a Muro friend for you as well. Did you meet him at her place?
I think she invited him to an event, a party, like a hang we were all at, and I met him there, and I, realized and recognized him immediately, and then he was like, "Hey, how are you?" But when he found out who I was the punk thing, he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And so now I see him at events and stuff, and he's great. I mean, pretty much all these people. I mean, you don't hang out with people you don't like, but when you, like you said, cool friends, like Michael, Jen, Dave, so then another 10 people like yourself who are cool and kind of are at the same level of interest. I mean, it's not. It's not a caste system or caste system where it's people from, literally people who make a lot of money and people who make very little money, or people who are famous and people who are behind the scenes. It's just kind of that cool friends group that, and it's funny in Hollywood, you've probably noticed it, or in the entertainment industry, it's a bunch of these webs of people who hang and know each other, and then there's a connecting person, and you kind of meet another pod of
I like addressing that because I do think that's really important that people understand, and that it is people of all different walks.
Yes.
But there is that sort of that glue that binds you in, that social understanding of like, oh, we like some of the same things, or, I mean, obviously, like I love Muppets. I did a podcast on Gremlins 2, The New Batch, which you worked on.
Oh my gosh, who was your guest?
Yeah, it was an episode of Nerd with my co-host Ray Alvarez, and we were doing the season, because we do 3-episode seasons, was insane sequels to popular films.
Nice.
And we talked all about just the utter sort of wildness of what Gremlins 2 actually was, how it's a self-satire, like a movie that parodies itself in real time. It's like unheard of.
Joe Dante given free reign before meta was even a term in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. As I looked through the things that really sort of hit me when I look at it, like one of the big things is you were the Timmy that they were going to need another of on dinosaurs.
On dinosaurs, yeah, that was so. I helped designed all the characters. Worked the last thing I worked on with Jim Henson. Well, sadly, that he passed.
Yeah.
But literally, we had a meeting about it. I'd done the second round of drawings, and there was no writers or anything. It was just Jim and I brainstorming. And that was a Friday, and he passed away, I think, on a Monday night. And then the company at that time was negotiating with Disney, so ABC was like, well, we pitched the idea to ABC, and they said, this is, we like this, we're interested, because the Ninja Turtle movies had done really well, and it was that technology of making walk around, unhuman characters,
suited puppets, really.
Suited puppets, yeah, with radio controlled faces. So they brought Michael Jacobs and Bob Young in, who wrote the pilot, and I worked with them on all the ideas, and I was sort of the point man for the creature shop, the Henson Creature Shop, that built all the characters. And what was great was Michael Jacobs, to his credit and my ever great gratitude, is that he said, you should be a writer on the show. You have all these ideas that are really fun and funny. And so that was my first writing gig. I joined the WGA and was, I forget, some kind of co-producer on the show. And I love that show. And so everyone got a chance to do a voice now and then. And so when we had Mr. Lizard, I could do I was basically doing Elroy Jetson. Golly, Mr. Lizard, what are we going to learn today? And so and Alan Troutman, who's one of the main puppeteers, he was like, whoa, we're going to need another Timmy. It was just dumb fun, but it was one of those shows that kind of stuff wasn't overly monitored, the kind of the weird woolly stuff that makes the show unique as opposed to
so great and so long-standing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we only did 65 episodes, but it certainly was unique.
I think the message of that show, I think, is very prescient, and we still see that a lot. Like, obviously the finale is considered one of the bleakest finales on such a silly, and but when you go through and you watch it, the messaging is so clear. Well, it's such a big environment. I think Jim would have been very.
Yeah, the ending of it was baked into the premise. When Jim and I were first decided, he said, look, humans have this kind of dinosaur thinking that, we can do whatever we want to the planet and treat it, we're the apex predator, so we can just do whatever the hell we want, not realizing you can actually, what do they call it, the Anthropocene, the human era on the planet. But you could bring about your own demise with that sort of short-sightedness. And so it was baked into the premise. Like, if we're going to end the series, we got to end it in a way that shows that they're going to, through their ignorance and hubris, destroy their own environment. And ultimately, they don't. I've had people come up to me, and they're always in their mid-30s, and you ruined my childhood. I cried for days. I was like, we didn't kill him. It was just snowing outside.
And also, first off, they've been dead. This was a long time ago.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Did you learn anything?
Spoiler alert: dinosaurs did die out. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I kind of always laugh and say, well, then we did our job, which made you upset that hopefully it put that seed in your head, whether you believe global warming is what's going to do it or not. It was baked into the premise. Let's show what that kind of thinking. And again, sadly, Jim didn't last beyond 2 or 3 design meetings with me and just batting around with Alex Rockwell, his development gal or assistant at the time. And so then she and I went in and with Brian Henson and kind of concocted what the show is, and they brought in Michael and Bob, and then the rest is history.
It's interesting too. There was a documentary on Jim on ABC
it just came out
last night or something like that. It was I think it was last night. And I watched the whole thing, and it was interesting because they were talking about that animatronic faces and stuff. And apparently they really brought that in with Labyrinth, with the Hoggle character. And I didn't realize Brian was the one that was operating it.
Yeah, and he's the voice.
Yeah, which I thought was really
interesting. The voice of Hoggle, which is Brian doing kind of a Grover kind of thing. Yeah, no, because Dark Crystal had some radio control, but not to the level of Labyrinth with Hoggle and what's his name, the big giant furry thing with
the orange hair.
It'll come to me tonight. I'll sit up in the middle of the night and go, or whatever his name.
Yeah, I'll go play the Labyrinth pinball game over at Ace Gogi after this.
You want to say Hodor because he's like a Hodor character. Yeah. It'll come to me anyway. So they developed that, and then that matriculated into or kind of opened the doors for the Ninja Turtle movies, which then opened the door. So dinosaurs that technology was perfected. It was sort of like the marathon,
Yeah.
because we were shooting 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year. So that technology got down to pretty much we could pop off a head, change out a servo, and it took 10 minutes.
For those of you that are yelling back home, it is Ludo.
Ludo, thank
We
you.
got it. So
Oh,
you wrote 5 episodes, at least
yeah,
credited 5 episodes
yeah.
on dinosaurs.
Oh,
And then what I like is you have a little time where you're probably doing, as far as writing is concerned, you
yeah.
have some time off and you come in with the screenplay to Muppet Treasure Island.
Well, actually, that little time off was me pitching and coming up. So we finished Dinosaurs, and then so the company's like, Christmas Carol did really well, which is the Muppets not being the Muppets but playing characters, which I love. I think that's a great use of them. It's like
Yeah.
Monty Python being, King Arthur and his Round Table, or characters in the time of the biblical era for Life of Brian. So I thought I loved Christmas Carol, I love the way it looked, but I also thought it was so sweet. I mean, that's the source material, but it was so sweet and charming. And let's do something crazy and rollicking. Like that to me was the Muppets, Gonzo doing crazy stuff and just weird things. And so I pitched a King Arthur and the Round Table. The big problem with that is the real story is about infidelity. It's about King Arthur's wife cheating on him with his best friend, despite all the dragons and all that stuff. So I loved Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland. I said, let's do a pirate movie, a rollicking, crazy pirate movie. And well, it's for kids, which I balk at a little bit, but Treasure Island is it's PD. You don't have to pay anybody the rights for it. And so we attacked it with Jerry Jewell and I, the head writer for the Muppet Show, who became a dear friend and my mentor in how to write for the Muppets, wrote our first draft. I said it started as Treasure Island, ended as a Hope and Crosby road picture, and so they slowly,
Don't they all?
yeah, they slowly kind of dragged us back into mostly the story. The first version had giant tiki god chasing him down to the beach, and literally characters looking at camera going, "This isn't even in the book,"
Oh yeah. So it was like fourth wall breaking.
Very well. The Muppets like to do that. We
Yeah.
did it a few times. Like, this is supposed to be a kids movie. So yeah, so we wrote right. I think it was the last season of Dinosaurs. I was part of the Henson Company, and we were pitching these ideas, and I kind of sold them on Treasure Island as like a big rollicking adventure, and on the big blue wet thing, and got to write that and go on set, and we wrote on while they were shooting for about a month, just doing punch up and and tailoring it for the cast, and it was great. It was a great experience, and Brian did an amazing job, and
One of the interesting things that I always wonder about working with the Muppets is because obviously the staging has to be so very specific.
yeah, and look easy, look natural.
Right. Like I remember in that documentary, they showed Jim doing the swamp scene in the Muppet movie and everything like that. And he was in what essentially was a trash can underwater.
Yeah.
And it's like when it comes to like punch up and things like that, like when you're writing a screenplay, like once the staging is set and it has to do that, like you do, I'm assuming you do have to stick to a certain, like you can't start getting
here's
wild,
the thing,
right?
the joke. You start with a story. What's a good story? What are the good characters? When it gets down to specifics, it's funny. You can always tell someone has not written the Muppets when they go, Miss Piggy flutters her eyelids coquettishly. Now, it's not terrible to write that, but she doesn't move her eyes. Her eyes don't blink. So they would write specific actions. And so what helps when you're writing, not just for the Muppets, but for puppets in general.
Oh my God, I just realized she doesn't blink.
No, she doesn't blink. She
Oh,
doesn't.
wow.
It's all good puppeteering. That's how good Frank Oz is, and all those guys. I mean, watching, watching Jim and then Steve Whitmire for years doing Kermit and showing Kermit going 3 expressions without ever saying anything, just using, doing his hand.
Or doing that scrunch.
Right, doing the scrunch. But that's a big thing. They can do subtle stuff.
Yeah.
Particularly Kermit, because he's basically a sock with, a tongue in it. And Frank is, that puppet head is pretty firm. It's foam latex, so it's not as squishy as Kermit. So it's all how he adjusts his body and cocks his wrist to make it look like she's looking away and tilts the head back, is when you imagine, oh, she's flooding her eyes. Watching those guys, it's funny. I went in going, oh yeah, puppets, blah blah blah, not knowing that they were good. But once you really get into the details of it, it's like when you learn an instrument.
Like if you hear a sax solo or you hear a clarinet playing, you're like, oh, that's good. But then if you try and play the clarinet or the sax or the guitar and you hear an Eddie Van Halen riff, you're like, oh.
Oh yeah, this is this is more than
Yes.
I thought. Yeah.
Yes, your respect multiplies, and watching the Muppets, going, oh yeah, they're funny and they bounce around. But then watching these guys like Frank Oz, I quote him a lot because he was an amazing performer and is a great director. But he said the funniest thing in the world is watching a puppet think, watching that penny drop. And writers tend to write all the dialogue that hey, I just had an idea. It'd be great, and it's funnier if you just see the puppet clock its head a little bit. And if you have a good puppeteer, you'll see, oh, he just got an idea, and that's just pure gold.
One of the strangest and most unique experiences I ever had was when I was a writer for Modern Mom, obviously. Obviously,
that's a TV show I want to watch.
I was a movie guy for Modern Mom, for the mommy bloggers. They were marketing me as like cool dad's cool friend that tells you if the movie's cool for your kids to watch and like
the
all the
uncle,
cool
the bachelor uncle,
yeah, kind of with the less molesty energy that the word uncle has earned.
I don't think that's fair, but yes.
Look, I don't either. Like
as an uncle, like 9 times over, I balk at that, but I get it. Especially,
I am exclusively an uncle, but I'm very much like I'm an uncle, but not the kind that people read about.
You're the funkle, the fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So I got to, for the Muppets Most Wanted, I got to go and see it at Disney and go to the press junket, which I thought was delightful. But then I also got to interview Constantine.
Oh, right.
The world's most dangerous frog.
Right.
And the thing that was fascinating to me, and the thing that whenever I describe this experience to people, because I'm like, look, it's surreal.
Yeah.
Talking to a Muppet is surreal, especially when the Muppeteer is literally in front of your face.
Yeah.
Because you meet the guy, hey, I'm Jeff, and you shake his right hand or his left hand.
Left hand, yeah.
And as I'm talking, and we're just having this normal conversation with this human, he wakes the Muppet up.
Right.
So the Muppet itself is like dormant and asleep, and then he activates it and makes, oh yes, hello. And that trick, that brilliant trick.
Yeah.
I was such a mark for that because I'm just, and then like every 3 minutes, maybe I would like kind of wake up from the Matrix and look at him. I'm like, I'm talking to a fist. And he's like, yeah, it's my hand. Like, I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah.
And that to me was insane.
I have, so my story about witnessing that with a guy who's probably one of the cool with, in quotes, people I worked with, and I don't mean that ironically, is Snoop Dogg.
Oh, nice.
Snoop Dogg had a cameo in Very Merry Muppet Christmas, which was cut out for time. People thought it was also because he started producing porn, and it was very out in the public. So we're like, do we really want to?
That was early. That was 2002. That was still slightly dangerous, Snoop.
Yeah, you couldn't have. Well, it didn't help. And the scene was really long. But it was a great scene, and it was Snoop just hanging with the band. But so he comes in, and he has an entourage, of course, like 5 or 6 people. He literally had a guy named Bishop Don Juan who was all dressed in, had an emerald in his tooth, had emerald sunglasses, an emerald bowler hat on, and a pimp stick. And he gave me a book at the end of the shoot day. It was like From Pimp Stick to Pulpit. And he had this entourage of characters. And Snoop was like, hey man, he's really cool. Just reeked of pot. But he's like, all right, cool. Hey. And I said, hey, do you want to, everyone's saying hi. I said, I'm the director. Here's what we're doing. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I said, you want to meet Kermit? He's like, what? And I go, yeah, Kermit. And Steve Whitmire, who's doing Kermit, I see him putting Kermit on his hand. So Steve walks up, just like you said, like his right hand is up with Kermit on, and Steve's standing right there. And he goes, oh, hey, Snoop. And Snoop lost his freaking mind. I literally thought he wet his pants. He buckles like his arms go in, and he smiles like his head's going to split. And he's like, oh, man, Kermit. And he became an 8-year-old kid. And he just started talking to Kermit. Steve Whitmire, he's like, I've loved you since I was a kid. Watch this. Oh, man, I love you. And he literally lost his shit for about 5 minutes. And they're like, well, I'm really glad you could do the show. Oh, and he's looking to his posse, and they're all like giggling. And it's amazing that, you see it with kids, you're like, oh, that's adorable. But to see it with a grown man and artists, he's obviously an artist and musician, are very in touch with their child. their kid self. But I have never seen a transformation like that. And I've seen adults giggle and smile and go, "Oh gosh," but Snoop lost his absolutely.
I could see it. I went to the Henson exhibit. Was it at Skirball at the Skirball? And they don't warn you that after you go through that first tunnel, the first thing you see is Bert and Ernie in a glass case.
Yeah.
They don't warn you about that. And I think they do that on purpose because they want you to start crying right when you walk in.
See, I didn't cry because I'd worked.
You work with the Muppets, man. Of
Well,
course you
no,
didn't
but
cry.
I mean, well, okay, but my first introduction to the Muppets, I started. There was an office building. There was 169, well, 117 is East 69th Street, and that was the office with marketing and all that. But then there was the shop, which is a building about 2 blocks away. So that's where they were going. Jim wanted my office there, so I was working a lot with the puppet builders and getting my head around designing puppets. That was my first gig. And so I went in there and I'm like, where are the puppets? They go, "Oh, they're in the morgue." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they walk over and there's just file drawers with plastic bags. And in there is every Muppet ever made. And it's like a morgue. You just pull out the drawer and there's Kermit, his mouth's open, just staring up. And
Coins
and
on
a
his
lot
eyes.
what's that?
Coins on his eyes.
Oh, actually, it's funny you say that. They actually have little cotton doilies or cotton, what do you call it? Like a little sock for their eyes because the paint can chip and whatever. So they have little doilies over their eyes or like, yeah.
They're like they're suntan glasses for when you go into a tanning bed. Yeah.
But they're soft cotton. And so there they are. And I've had other people go, "Oh my God," when I saw that, I started crying. And I'm like, okay, I knew that they were not a living thing, but it is shocking just as a visual. But yeah, I saw the exhibit in the 70s when it went around, The Art of the Muppets, and I still have the little guidebook that came out.
Oh wow.
I was like, my nose is in the glass looking like, how does he make, what are they made of? I was fascinated by what the materials were and how big they were. A lot of the other thing people are surprised by is how small Kermit was and how big the baby dinosaur is. Those are the two things that people go, "Oh wow, I said, he's literally a hand with a," and baby dinosaur is enormous. He's the size of like a 5-year-old because again, his family were all much bigger than average humans. So
Yeah, that is really fascinating. Speaking of fascinating things, I don't know if you knew this, but just like you are a producer on various things that we can go through, I also have producers. And if you head on over to patreon.com/JeffMay, that's JEFFMAY, and you want to give me a little bit of money, it's not a lot. I will say your friggin' name on here. I'm a whore. And I will read off whatever you need. So we got a couple of people to thank. We're going to give a big, huge shout out to Burrito, which I want to get now. Are you a burrito guy?
oh, love, that's my favorite. That and tostada is my favorite, but burrito's my number one. Yeah.
You're in the Valley, right?
Yep. Grew up in Van Nuys.
You ever go to Cilantro, get the surf and turf?
No, but I'm down.
Cilantro Mexican Grill. It's off of the 170.
I've seen it.
It's in the gas station. It's at the gas station right off of the Sherman Way West. They have the surf and turf burrito. It's the best burrito you'll ever have.
We'll have burritos there, and we'll go to Golden Compass for Mai Tais afterwards.
Let's do it. And then we can go to Ace Gogi and play Labyrinth Pinball.
Deal. That's
okay. Shout out to Burrito. Shout out to Mr. Billy Beck, who I just saw at Mint on Card on Friday. That was very nice to see him. Shout out to the Tubi Terror Bunny, says the strike may be over, but egg, and then just pick any CEO of any large production company and say, because shout out to Lemming Malloy returns. Shout out to Bart Fardigan. Shout out to Dan Adamski, the world's humblest man. Shout out to Norm from Cheers. Norm. Shout out to Dan Hackroyd. Shout out to Normal Man, Andrew McGuire. Shout out to check out this month's Nerd with Dre and Jeff, where we're covering the classic syndicated martial arts stunt spectacular television show WMAC Masters.
Wow.
With special guest Logan Trent. Do you ever heard of WMAC Masters?
No.
It's like, what if American Gladiators was scripted and it had like a weird thread in it, and also it was stunt performers doing martial arts at each other?
Wow.
It is an unhinged and insane television show. I'm glad we got to cover that. Yeah. Shout out to Watch Me use these prehensile nipples to pick up pennies off of the floor.
I want to meet that person.
You can. He is in San Bernardino. I think San Bernardino. He's come out to Mint on Card before. Shout out to the Oatmeal Savage. Are you an oatmeal guy or are you a no oatmeal
guy? I like it. It's not, it's not cold enough here. When I lived in colder climes, it was a little more.
Yeah, I do like an oatmeal in in February.
Yeah. I eat it cold too. I don't eat it hot. I eat
Cold oatmeal. Okay, so you are
Yeah.
gross. I'm glad I asked.
I'm
'Cause
very
that's
gross.
disgusting. Show's over. You eat cold oatmeal?
Yeah, you make it in the fridge. You do it overnight. You soak it in the milk overnight.
Oh, I guess like
No, well,
overnight
and then
oats.
it's like yogurt. It's cold and mushy and goopy like yogurt. Yeah, overnight oats.
Okay, that's fair. You know what? I hadn't really realized that I've made
See,
those parfait
I've
overnight oat
opened I've
parfaits.
opened I've opened your world to new possibilities.
It's yeah. Put some blueberries in there, a little honey,
That's it.
a little Greek
Exactly.
yogurt.
Blueberries, honey, and a little yogurt. And man, it's a good breakfast.
I will say this, in hot yogurt, I like a raisin.
Ooh, that's why I don't like hot yogurt.
I mean,
Like,
excuse me, not hot oatmeal.
oh, I was like, hot yogurt? Yeah, pass.
Hot yogurt, no thanks.
Yeah, no,
No
hot,
thanks.
hot oatmeal, cinnamon, and raisins. To get that. I'm
Yeah,
down.
I have a raisin guy
I love
at the
raisin.
farmer's market at Larchmont. I got a
Oh, you
raisin guy.
have a I think you
I
said
got a raisin guy.
Wow, you're
He's
fancy.
awesome.
You're fancy.
I mean, am I? I'm wearing a Jurassic Park tank top.
There you
So
go.
I don't know how fancy you think I am. Shout out to Call Me Sean or whatever. Shout out to Aldo Vargas is adding Jeff Has Cool Friends producer to his resume. Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, I will have him call me. I will absolutely back you up and I will say you're one hell of a producer. Shout out to the scene in Lost City where Brad Pitt dies. Shout out to the ghost of Dave Thomas. Shout out to I'm going to start calling Yoda Old Grogu just to see what happens. Shout out to mashed potatoes are the brioche buns of side dishes. That's the inside joke there is that I think both of those items are relatively overrated and
Yeah.
people hate me for that,
Wow.
especially the mashed potatoes thing.
Yeah, I hear you.
And finally, the enchanted, wandering, unpierced left nipple cider served at room temperature. Thank you. That's actually the person that you could meet. I realize off the floors there. Oh, and I forgot, of course, Sean, or wireless, however we want to call him. I have written down wireless Sean. So sorry that's how I wrote your name down, wireless, but you rule. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May if you want to do that. Plus, we have lots of other really cool stuff in there, including you can get stuff in the mail. I mail people cards sometimes.
Wow.
Trading cards. I open cards on camera and then I mail
That's
cards.
amazing. I thought this wasn't a camera show. This is just a podcast.
No, well, that yeah, but the other show is.
Oh, the other show's on camera.
Yeah, that's called I Must Break You, because I was a boxer.
Yes.
And opening packs of cards is called a break.
Oh, okay.
So I must break you. There it is. We got there. Hey, you won an Emmy for Muppets Tonight, which was a 90s Muppet version of like behind the scenes on a late night show.
Well, yeah, the idea was it's Gary Shandling. The Muppet Show was essentially Gary Shandling at a theater, and we did more Gary Shandling at a variety show. And so it's, the joke, I knew Gary Shandling writers, and the joke was we just did the Muppet Show, except, instead of Kermit, it was Gary Shandling, and you got the behind the scenes and the on the show. And it was fun. And we won an Emmy. We tied with Bill Nye the Science Guy.
You tied with Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yeah, we won an Emmy, and it was a tie. And yes, and that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee in this town.
That's really interesting because for some reason I thought you guys had tied with Nick News.
No,
because that's what IMDb says you guys tied.
Oh, really? No, it was Bill Nye the Science Guy because I was there.
That's crazy. There's actually another very weird thing is that your Wikipedia birth date has a citation needed. So I don't know if you want to get in there and cite it.
What date does it say?
Valentine's Day of 1962.
Yep, that is accurate. Well, it's 1972 because I want to appear 10 years younger. Though.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what it says here. Yeah.
No, that's right. I don't know why I need a citation. I'll call.
All right. So if Wikipedia is a subscriber to the show, and I think they are, then you have your citation.
There you go. I cite you.
Kirk is citing that. So there you go.
So now you know where to send birthday cards.
Do you get the Emmy? Do you have it?
Yeah, it's sitting in my living room.
So that was like 1998. So it's
I think it was 98.
It's like a 26-year-old. Does that still stay really shiny? Like, do you properly care for it all the time, or does it?
Yeah, I don't hold it a lot. Walk around. I did for about a year. I would bring it to Zoom meetings when Zoom, and I just have it sitting like in the background behind me. And I'd always, make a joke like, "Oh, sorry, is the light shining off my Emmy?" Didn't get me any work, but it did get a laugh. No, it sits there. Friends of mine, I have a bunch of friends at ILM who have Oscars, and if you hold it enough, the gold plating is I mean, paper thin makes its paper's way thicker than the plating on it. It's literally like of gold
Yeah.
on the Emmys and the Oscars. So if you handle it a lot, it just rubs off. So I earthquaked it to the bookcase that it's on, because after the Northridge earthquake, if that thing's flying across the room with those two pointy wings of
Yeah,
electric,
right.
it could stab you in the head. Yeah, no, I still have it. I wouldn't part with it. I almost got another Emmy for Muppet Haunted Mansion, but they did not award it. It won for something else. I don't remember, like music or something.
One of the things that was a real curveball in my research that I got very excited about
Ooh.
was that not your Emmy award. I mean, I assumed you had had some kind of Emmy with all the stuff that you had worked on. So when I saw that, I was like, of course he has an Emmy.
Oh, you're very
You
kind.
actually have a Webby Award. Now,
I
that
have-
award in of itself, I understand it's not like the biggest, most prestigious thing, but what you have 3 Webby Awards.
yeah, that's the only one I actually went and got the award for, because it was
The
so big.
Webby Award that I saw that you won for is something where I was like, oh, he did that. And it was for the Muppets doing Bohemian Rhapsody,
Yeah.
which has been virally
Oh,
existing for
a
15 years now.
a couple 100 million views. It's the only, if I had a penny for every view, I would be living in somewhere beautiful and not working. Yeah, it's crazy how successful that was. I mean,
What idea was that?
we kind of would brainstorm, back in the day. We say, let's do a viral video, because you don't want to do a crappy video.
Yeah.
So somebody had floated. We were talking about songs like I remember American Pie had a lot of votes, and we just kind of, it's very much a democracy there.
You're like, we don't have time for American Pie.
Yeah. So, and it was, I was like, well, it's American Pie. Is that going to alienate other countries because the Muppets are beloved worldwide? So somebody floated. I can't take credit for floating the idea, but I definitely was on board for Bohemian Rhapsody. I said, well, that's great. What's even greater was, and I don't know how many people know this, Queen are huge Muppet fans, again, Brits. They gave us their stems. That's their music. Well, the only thing in Muppet Bohemian Rhapsody is the vocals. I think even the backing vocals is us and Queen, or the Muppets and Queen. It's their music. So we are literally singing Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody with
To
Muppets.
Queen because they
gave
so
us
cool.
their music stems, they call it.
Sometimes I see those and it almost seems where I'm always like, this seems like some fan wonderfully created these things,
Right.
and then to learn that they were done by the actual people. Because there's also a really good one for Smells Like Teen Spirit
with the Muppets. Yeah, that's fan created,
I believe, but it's like,
yeah, no, well, you could get so much. They also did Biz Markie's. You got what, and there's been a bunch of stuff. Somebody did something with dinosaurs, a lot of rap songs, because they have that syncopation that works with quick cuts. We wanted to do for years the Rocky Horror. We want to do a Muppet version of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
The Muppet Horror Picture Show.
Muppet Horror Picture Show, exactly. And everyone was like, no, you can't do that because it's about transvestites and, sex. But we always thought it'd be funny. I said, well, let's just do either the Time Warp or Sweet Transvestite.
I don't think they were going to let you do Sweet Transvestite.
No, Time Warp we could do. But then Jack Black did a cover of it with Kyle and a bunch of celebrities. I'm like, well, but I always wanted to do the Time Warp because Tim Curry is a friend and a great human being.
Are there still like songs that you would like to be like, I want to do this
with the Muppets?
Yeah, like
we're kind of out of the viral video stage, so I haven't really thought about it for a while. I remember American Pie was big. We were trying to think of like, what are these ballads, these just epic songs that everybody knows. Bill Beretta has a huge list of stuff. He's a great singing voice, and he was a big reason that Muppets from Space has, what's his name? The funk soundtrack with the music.
George Clinton?
George Clinton, yeah, and the P-Funk All-Stars doing, was it not Atomic Dog? I forget what song it is. But anyway, yeah, well, like one of the ones I loved, and was my idea, was Stand By Me with Big Mean Carl clubbing bunnies over the head. That was a viral video we did. And my pitch was, no, he's got to be like, Big Mean Carl, if you don't know him, he's like he's huge, he's a big puppet. And he's sitting there with bunny ears on, singing Stand By Me, and these little bunnies are coming up to him, he's a giant carrot. And they come up to him, and they're like, hi, and he's like, and he clubs them over the head and eats them. Which to me, I mean, the Muppets, that's the Sullivan Show, is eating each other.
Is he the one that's like, he talks like this?
Yeah, he's got a big mouth. Like, hi, I'm a bunny. Yeah.
He was great in the Muppets, like the 2013
Oh yeah, the
show,
Muppets.
like
yeah,
that character.
Love Carl. That Bill Beretta. So he was a puppet that existed, but Bill Beretta again took that puppet and just made this great big idiot loudmouth dummy who eats everything. I love the extreme. I mean, I love everything, but the Kermit Piggy stuff, Gonzo staring his navel, Fozzie being insecure, that's been so well covered and so established that I wanted to do a New Zealand love story. You know, like
I love New Zealand.
yeah,
so
I
much.
love New Zealand too, and I want to know who would date or marry him because he loves the fish, but does he? I'm like, and you know, this is as a writer creator with like, let's explore New Zealand. Like, wouldn't it be great if you had this gorgeous wife, you know, who's super tolerant, like she runs an aquarium or runs a fish store, you know, a pet store with fish, and that's how they. I mean, that to me is so much fun with those kind of secondary characters that you know fans know and people recognize. But yeah, I love those guys, and the weirder the better in my book.
Like a lot of that. I think one of the things that I find interesting is that sort of when Disney had acquired the Muppets and when they were starting to do things, and you had things like the Muppets Most Wanted, and you had that Muppets television show, and it seemed like a lot of people from my generation specifically were pushing back against them.
Yeah, well,
and they were, especially the Muppets show, they were like, oh, it's too adult. And I'm like, did you not see the Muppet show?
I know what they're saying. I thought it was too mean spirited maybe, but also it didn't have any of the wacky stuff that the Muppet Show had. There were no sketches. It really became
It was The Office. It was
The Office, but it was Gary Shandling. It was just she had a talk show, and you'd see the backstage stuff. And to me, the backstage stuff is it most should be half, and it became 80% backstage. And it's because they hired regular TV writers. They wouldn't even consider me or
Really?
Jim Lewis. Yeah, they were like,
fuck 'em,
we got this. We know TV comedy, and they made a show that nobody. I didn't say nobody liked, but it didn't win over. Let's say it didn't win over new viewers.
I really liked it, and I was bummed to see it go.
Yeah,
but you know, now that I know that they can right off. I'm glad.
Well, here's what's interesting. After the first seasons, the ratings went straight down.
Yeah,
they were going to bring me in to be a co-executive, co-EP it, and it was funny because the person they had who was going to run it said, "I get it." Literally, they said, "Oh, you drank the Kool-Aid. You know, you're one of the inside group, so I get it. And you know, you bring that wacky, zany stuff." And it was a little condescending, like, "Oh, you're the weirdo, but you get it, and they like you because they don't like me." And they didn't. They very much did not like this person. A lot of people condescending towards the Muppets and kind of like, "Oh, it's a kid's show," and including the executives at the current owners, you know, like, "Oh, it's a kid's show." You know, I think they've been, I will say when the Henson family and, you know, Jim and then Brian ran it, they did not look down on the Muppets as like, "Oh, it's just a dumb kid's puppet show."
It's not. The Muppets was never a kid's show.
I know. And
that's why they made Muppet Babies, to make a kid's show, or Fraggle Rock.
Or Fraggle Rock. Exactly. Those were for kids. The Muppets I always said it was Monty Python sketch comedy with puppets. And Jim, when I first met him and started working with him, he absolutely agreed. And one of the first things I was designing was a new rock band with edgier, you know, he loved the mayhem, but he thought, well, you know, Jim was never complacent. He was like, "Great, we did the Muppet Show. Now what's the new Muppet Show?" And he was doing a thing called Intertube TV, which you can Google and see. And it was very tech driven, a lot of effects, a lot of green screen. And he just wanted to keep doing new stuff and creating, that's why we got along great. I'm like, I wasn't a fan of the Muppets in that, "Oh, I love them and I want to keep making the Muppet Show." I want to do cool stuff. Mm-hmm. In fact, the original title for Jim Henson Hour was going to be Jim Henson's Neat Stuff. Because he just like, "Oh, let's make cool new stuff," you know, and he loved technology. I worked with the Waldo character. It's in the 3D movie. That was one of the first things I did, was because I'd had some computer graphics background with working at ILM and knowing those guys. So yeah, I've been I gave up the fight. I don't really try and push anything on the new owners of the Muppets, and they're not interested in hearing from me, so it works out great.
I think a lot too about the pocket that the Muppets are placed in from social context as being like a kid's show that
Right.
the family enjoyed, when the reality was it's more of an adult show that the family enjoyed, and
Right.
kids could buy into that. And then when you look at something like, The Dark Crystal, which is considered this massive cult hit, but you look at it, and first and foremost, it was released like a week after ET. And also, like, that is not really a kid's movie,
No,
but
it's indecipherable for
but
kids. It looks amazing, but I
yeah,
don't know what's going on.
I used to watch it. We used to rent it on VHS like every week.
Oh.
It was back when like you couldn't even buy it at the store. You rent it.
That's why it was such a cult hit, because you just could watch it over and over again and see little things in the background. And Jim loved that stuff. His apartment at the Sherry Netherland in the place in England had, bookcases with little sculptures and creatures. I remember he had a ceramic thing, looked like a hedgehog, and it was from like ancient Greece. Like it was literally like 4,000 or 5,000 years old. And he would say it's the first Muppet because it looked like a Muppet. It's a little creature thing with a long nose, and it looked like an echidna or a hedgehog. And he was like, "Oh, it's one of the first Muppets." And so he just loved cool, weird little things, and
Wow.
saw Brian Froud's work and was like, "I want to do a world of that."
I have a concept print of that signed by Brian Froud of The Dark Crystal.
Nice.
That's how important that movie was to me.
Wow.
We're about to wrap up the main episode. This moved really fast. We're going to have a little bit of bonus stuff for all the people at patreon.com/JeffMay. But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was actually kind of one of the reasons that we're actually recording this a little later than I normally do, which is that you've been working on a show that's going to premiere in the fall.
Yes, this October. It's called Max and the Midnights. I'm a director on it. I guess there's after 2 seasons there'll be 5 directors on it. So
Oh wow.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 5. I'm one of 5. I've done 14 episodes out of 40, so about a third. And it's great. It's CG. It's all animated in 3D, which is great for me because it's sort of like directing live action, but in a world where you don't have to fight physics. And it's based on a kids book series called Max of the Midnights. And it's sort of a fun adventure. I said it's like Goonies in medieval times with wizards and dragons and trolls and ogres and an evil king and a sorceress, and it's a lot of fun. They brought me in to kind of bring the comedy as well as just directing experience, but my episodes tend to have a little more of if you look at Muppet movies and watch Treasure Island, you see kind of the nuttiness that's there. My episodes tend to have quirky little odd things that I try and just put in there to make it stand out. I guess it's what I enjoy doing. So
that makes sense though too, because like that's I mean, for lack of a better term, people that work with Muppets should be weird.
yes, we're not
So, like it makes sense that you're like, yeah, I like some weird and I'd be like, I sure would hope so.
Okay, so you can see 2 episodes on Nickelodeon's YouTube channel. They did a soft launch where they didn't promote it at all, but I think episode 1 and 2 of the first season are on Nickelodeon's YouTube channel. It's Max and the Midnights. So you get an idea of the show. I didn't direct either of those. My first episode, season 1, is episode 4. And then I do every third one. There. So I do 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, 19.
Okay.
And then we're finishing up. I'm just breaking down the last episode of the second season, actually, this week. I'm finishing the my second to last episode, which is
that's awesome. And it is Max and the Midnights, by the way. Midnights is spelled with a K, like midnight. So MIDKNIGHTS.
11-year-old nights, so they're midnights as opposed to full nights.
Oh, okay.
And it's based on a book series by a great author named Lincoln Pierce, who not only writes them but draws them. And so the series kind of has there was a very concerted effort to make it look like a 3-dimensional version of his kind of cartoons, and so it has a very unique look. It was very intentional that it looks like stop motion. It looks like kind of like a new version of a Rankin Bass.
Oh, great.
Kind of thing. There's text. The water and thing looks textural. Doesn't look like CG water. It looks like cellophane. It was, even though it isn't, there was a very concerted effort to make it look like we had done it on tabletops with felt and foam.
That's really cool. I love that aesthetic.
Yeah.
So fun. I really like that. Like I remember Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Yes.
was
Yeah,
just such an absolute masterpiece, and the
that's
aesthetic.
yeah, the characters. What's amazing about our show, because we use Unreal Engine and it's photorealistic, so it looks like little miniature trees, and this world is very real. Our characters are stylized. They're sort of like the 3D Charlie Brown character. They have like little button eyes, bead eyes. Not there's no whites.
Yeah, that's like almost like tall button eyes.
Yeah, but so it has this charm to it. Again, it's Nickelodeon, so it's for kids. I tried to bring, I said I want to make the episodes where the stoners in college go, this is crazy. Like what SpongeBob. I mean, I think to me a great kid show is just a great show.
Yeah.
I don't like playing down to kids. When I was a kid, I hated when things were like, oh, this is for kids, so we're gonna cut all the crust off the bread and make the bad guys completely goofy and not actually a threat. So we have good bad guys, and there's dragons and ogres and trolls, and the kids almost get eaten and dropped and eaten by spiders, and so it's a great action adventure comedy is what I would say, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. I think it's a fun show, and it's been great because it's given me it will give me 3 years worth of work when the Muppets wouldn't hire me.
Right. What I love about this is that my listeners are oftentimes have children that are younger.
Yeah.
So like not only can they enjoy things like Muppet Haunted Mansion on their own, which you totally can. It was really fun as an adult. I watched it alone today and it was great. But sharing that with your kids and maybe doing stuff that you didn't even know was still being made. Right. The Muppets do sort of still fly under the radar, even though they're such a huge property.
Yeah.
And so Max and the Midnights, I think, would be a great thing for you if you guys got kids. Check it out. I'm looking at the designs right now, looking really cool. I'm very excited to see that aesthetic.
Yeah, we have a great cast. Melissa Villaseñor.
I love Melissa.
Yeah, she talks like this. She kind of talks like a female criminal.
Oh, yeah. She was made to be like a puppet voice.
Yeah, and she's one of the funniest kids. She's this daffy girl character, which I guess I'm not giving away if you watched it on YouTube, named Millie, and she's hilarious. And the writers just wrote this great goofy, and she embodied this one of the gags I wrote is like one of the first few episodes, they're confronted by living gargoyles, like big scary gargoyles, and one of them like wraps around his arms around trying to grab her, and she pops up between his arms and goes boop on his nose and runs away.
Yeah.
To me, that's so Millie. Like she's kind of fearless because she's goofy and incredibly bold. So they're really great, distinct characters. Again, like Goonies. To me, it's sort of a medieval version of Goonies with the world of King Arthur with dragons and knights and ogres and sorcerers and wizards. There's time travel. Season 2 is crazy. It's a really fun show. I think, and it doesn't look like anything else, particularly on television or streaming for kids. So I think it'll get noticed.
I'm excited. I'm excited for that. And I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. For those of you that would like to follow Kirk on social media, on Twitter, yes, I'm still calling it that, at Kirk Thatcher, that's KirkThatcher. On Instagram, it's Kirk R. Thatcher, because somebody stole Kirk Thatcher from you. Kirk R. Thatcher, so it's the same, just with that R in the middle there. Check out Kirk's IMDb as far as promotion goes, because there's so much amazing stuff on there that you got to check out if you haven't seen things like Werewolf by Night or Muppets Haunted Mansion or Muppet Treasure Island. Curious
Creations of Christine McConnell. A shout out. I wrote and directed. I wrote 4 out of the 6 and directed all of them and helped create that show. That's on Netflix. Here's my pitch. It's if Morticia Addams had a Martha Stewart show.
Yeah. And as well, Morgana Ignis is the big
is the
werewolf character as well.
One of her last costume roles, because now she's an on-camera actress and amazing.
Yeah, she's
you're kind of like seeing her like, wow, why were you in costumes for so long and makeup? Because it's a skill. Like that is a skill. It's just like being a puppeteer. It's highly underrated.
Yeah, her journey has been fantastic, and definitely, you know what? Go back and listen to that episode too, because it's really fascinating.
In fact, I have a podcast I do with a buddy of mine.
What's the podcast called?
Bearded Weirdos.
Weirdos.
We just had Kelsey Mann, the director of that, on our podcast. It's on YouTube and a bunch of, I think, Apple and all the podcast places.
Kirk, did I miss anything?
Probably, but I don't know.
I can't go through this.
Oh, I know. Gremlins too. I'm the voice, the main character. I did a bunch of voices, but Greta, the female gremlin that makes out with Bob Picard, that's me.
Do you because you were just at Star Trek Las Vegas. Do you guys have that connection where you're like,
I didn't talk to Bob. I didn't even see him. I wanted to see him. I got to see Chris Lloyd because I was the Klingon dog that I went up to Chris. I hadn't seen him since 1985, whenever we shot that. I said, "It's great to see you again. The last time I saw you, I spent a week pretty much under your butt." And he looked at me. I said, "I was the Klingon dog in Star Trek 3 that was I was under your chair with my arm outside." And he laughed. So I got a great picture of he and I and my arms up like this.
Oh, that's awesome.
I said, "It's you, me, and the dog," and he was great. It was really nice to see him. So yeah, I have a lot of weird, that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know if IMDb even mentions that.
Who knows?
They didn't give me credit because it was a SAG role, but I wasn't a SAG performer at that point. And so they just said I was I didn't even know if I got effects technician credit. So yeah, I did a bunch of things. I could talk about Star Trek 4 for this entire hour, so we'll do that.
Well, you don't have to, but we can have a little bit of bonus content for the people that are on patreon.com/Jeff May. For those of you that are listening for free, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Please check out all my other shows like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman on Gamefully Unemployed. Check out Nerd, which is on this channel as well. If you head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May, you get early access, uncensored episodes, bonus content. You get Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl. You get Nerd early. I do all the stuff with Adam Todd Brown on You Don't Even Like This network, and as well as, of course, the Jeff Has Cool Cards YouTube page. Head on over to any of those things and check them out. Kirk, we're going to say goodbye to the freeloaders.
Bye, freeloaders.
We're going to talk to the patrons who we love also, but maybe
love a little more, just a little bit more. Tiny little bit more.
And as a reminder, and I will say this again, if you are signing up for the Patreon, or if you are a member of the Patreon and you use it through Apple, please do yourself a favor. Cancel that subscription on Apple. Cancel your Patreon subscription on Apple, and then subscribe through the website, patreon.com/Jeff May. It's the same. You'll get the same access to everything. You just won't have to deal with a surcharge or something like that, because Apple's trying to like extort Patreon. And it's like, let Patreon extort the artists.
Yeah,
they're already doing the extorting.
Exactly. How many
pyramid extortion scheme?
How many agents and managers do you need that you don't even know?
All right, say bye to the freeloaders. Bye.
Bye, freeloaders. We love you. Buy me a drink.
Hey everyone, our artwork is created by Justin T. Brown, who can be found at Artness by Justin Brown on Instagram, as well as artnessbyjustinbrown.com. That dope music you heard is by Troy Nababon, available at Troy Nababon on Instagram, as well as at troynababon.com. Nababon is spelled Nababan, and